Trains have been a dangerous place for women, both in anime but also in real life. In Japan, women's only trains have been the solution. Japan's women's only trains are gender segregated training cars, available for women as well as children, disabled individuals, and their caregivers. You can locate these special train cars at the end of 10 to 15 car trains, and the number of them are growing. However, why are women's only train cars so widespread in Japan? According to the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, 25 billion passengers use the Japanese railway system, and in the Tokyo metro area alone, over 35% of passengers are women. Despite the efficiency of the system, women face dangerous commuter experiences.
A chikan is a man on train who takes advantage of young girls by touching them in an indecent manner.
According to the Metropolitan Police Department, 1,750 chikan cases were reported in 2017. 30% of cases were during train rush hours from 7 to 9 a.m., and half of these cases are heard on trains. But why is it significantly more common in trains? Train etiquette and metro policy. Unlike the New York City subway, Japanese trains are quiet. Train etiquette is heavily mandated across many metro companies.
携帯の音、電車の中とか電話しちゃいけないから、そこだけ理解してほしいなって思います。
確かに誰でも電話しないですね、周りの人も。
大勢で
Trains in Tokyo are usually 150% over maximum rider capacity during rush hour. The crowded train, quiet atmosphere, and phone ban traps women, especially if they are in corners where the molester can grope them discreetly.
I have been touched a lot of times around here, and most people I know have had the same experience.
Using the AirDrop smartphone function, this pervert sent me a picture of his thing.
Despite the prevalence, women have trouble retaliating and punishing their perpetrator. And feminist protesting. But it wasn't until 1988 when protests intensified. November 1988, a woman at the Mitsuoji line Osaka entered a train car seeing a woman being harassed by two men. Shocked, the woman confronted the two men. However, the two angry men started yelling and harassing the woman before carrying her out of the train. Despite the growing crowd, no one stopped to help. Afterwards, the two men carried her to a nearby construction site before raping her. What ensued was a bigger push against train chikan. Feminists began creating and posting anti-chikan posters up until even today. Posters, however, were removed by train companies because they were afraid it would ruin their brand image. The ongoing issue of chikan emerged more and more in mainstream media. Men confessed their fear of being victims of false accusations. Meanwhile, women continuously protested against the chikan they would experience on the same train. The women's lane train car then became the solution.
KO 電鉄は電車内の痴漢対策として 来週から一部の車両に防犯カメラを
In 2000, Keio Corporation, a major railway company in Tokyo, launched a women's-only train car trial. During the late-night operating hours, women can use the new gender-segregated train. Women-only trains, however, aren't new. Since the 1900s, gender-segregated trains have been introduced, but they were all shortly discontinued. Unlike past women's-only train cars, Keio instated them for women's protectionism to combat Chikan, and the trial was a success. With overwhelming support from the Ministry of Transportation, private metro companies under JRB, Japan's trade conglomerate, began installing women's-only trains. Despite its growing popularity, these trains have been met with mixed reactions. Over 70% of women in Tokyo have supported these gender-segregated trains. Meanwhile, more women across Japan have expressed their support via social media. Feminist scholars have argued against these trains, however.
It's old-fashioned sexism. It's ridiculous and it's unworkable. And what we need to do is ensure that men take responsibility for their sexually harassing behaviour. We need to ensure that men are prosecuted if they break the law. We need to deter them from doing so. And the last thing that we need to do, as Corbyn is suggesting to me, is normalise their behaviour.
Somebody saying, well, why did you get into a mixed gender carriage
So
if
it becomes
you didn't want to be assaulted? I
the
mean, we
equivalent
have...
of a short skirt.
Exactly.
And other women have pointed out accessibility issues. In a 2011 study, researchers studied Tokyo women's use of the women's-only train car, and they categorized them into 4 groups: supportive users, supportive non-users, non-supportive users, and non-supportive non-users. The largest of the 4 groups were supportive non-users. These women rarely used the women's-only train because it was an inconvenience. Women's-only train cars are usually on the ends of trains. Thus, women on one side of the platform would have to walk at most 20 meters to get to the train car, and would also have to walk relatively longer distances to get to the exit gate. Rush hour makes this even more difficult, and many women are walking in high heels too on their commutes through large crowds.
20,000 people have signed a petition railing against work dress codes that make high heels mandatory.
My feet start hurting, and it's painful to stay standing in heels. Sometimes my back even starts to hurt.
I feel so free and relaxed when I come home and take my heels off. They hurt my feet.
Other women have also noted that the women's-only train cars are unavailable when they need to commute. Inconvenient metro policies not only disincentivize women from boarding, but also let men board too. Despite the name, men can still legally enter women's-only train cars. Many women have complained about the lack of policy measures enforcing these women's-only train cars, and men are exploiting them.
I guess there's my gals that are on. So I guess I get to ride in another car. I have to ride in a different car? No!
Conservative men's groups have fought commuter gender segregation since the beginning. And in 2018, these anti-women's-only train protesters performed sit-ins in these women's-only train cars and pressed the emergency button to delay the train in protest. Men's groups have also organized several demonstrations and as well as acts of chemical terrorism against local government supporters. The considerable number of men against staff say that segregation is not the answer, and it is in fact a form of discrimination against men. In response, women have staged protests against metro companies to resetify this policy gap.
こんばんは、北原です。去年の4月11日に集まったんですけど、ここにその日もこんなとても寒い夜でした。今度は社会が変わっていく場だ。だからこそこれから終わりではなくて、新しいフラワーデモのきっかけになるような、そういうことをみんなでしていきたいと思います。
Other women and men have even lost trust in the alleged effectiveness of pink trains and conventional law enforcement. 56% of Japanese women have said that installing better security cameras and placing them in trains would be the best anti-Chikan alternative. Others have even invented devices for other women.
She recently developed a program, the Chikan Radar, an early warning system to combat gropers. 40,000 have already registered.
でもやっぱりその自分の声で怖くて声に出せなかったりとかするのをそのボタン一つでタッチして音が出たりするのはすごい助かると思います。
Chikan is still a major problem in Japan, and the installment of trains is only at best a temporary solution to the issue, and a first step. Train guides instructing women to go on them force the onus on women in supporting Chikan culture. Before Chikan can be stopped, companies need to improve their design of women's-only trains, expand sexual harassment punitive policies, and more systemic measures of objectification need to be targeted.